Hello and welcome to SEC baseball content here at Southeastern 16. I'm Chris Lee, joined by Graham Doty. Special guest Ben McDonald joins us today. He's been the college baseball player of the year, the number one pick on the draft. He was a legend at LSU, starting rotation for the Baltimore Orioles, does broadcast work for them now, does college baseball work for ESPN, the SEC network. Ben, did I miss anything there? You've got a long list of accolades.
Yeah, it's so long ago. I felt like somebody else did all those things, and so the game has passed me by on the field. But I'm lucky that I still get to talk about it a little bit. And college, but this time of the year is obviously very busy for me between doing Oriole stuff and bouncing back and forth. When I'm home, I'm doing college stuff, and of course, I'm leaving again day after tomorrow to go do some more Orioles stuff. And then I'll come back for the LSU Arkansas series in a couple weeks. And eventually, eventually I'll have that full month of regionals, super regionals, and then the College World Series, which I always look forward to.
So other than that, what's happening?
Well, I try to keep my wife happy and cut the yard. And I got a long honey-do list whenever I do get home to do. And so we stayed I was fortunate to be home for Easter. I'm hardly ever home on Easter Sunday. So that was fun to hang out with the family and do some things around the house. Played my first pickleball yesterday, which I found out I need a lot of practice on that. It's kind of like an amped up ping pong game is what it is. But anyway, I got to do that for the first time out there in the driveway. And so that was fun yesterday. So yeah, everything's good, man. It's just busy this time of the year, and just watching how this SEC baseball is starting to unfold. Now that we kind of 6 weekends in, we kind of know, who's who, but there's a lot of stuff going to happen these final 4 weekends for sure.
Yeah, let's start with just the league, the bigger picture. I mean, it's crazy, Ben. I was looking this weekend at the RPI. South Carolina, who's 15 in the league, does not have a loss in quad 2, 3, or 4. I mean, it's a beauty pageant everywhere. You got Georgia's number one in the RPI today. It was 6th in our power rankings. That's just the league that we're covering this year. And I think the thing that I keep getting to in my mind, we always look ahead to postseason, right?
Right.
I'm just curious how many bids we think the SEC can get. I know that like 12 and 17 has always been kind of the glass ceiling. Like if you get a rain out and you win 12 games in the league, you can get in. But if you play the full schedule and you're 12 and 18, I don't think that's ever gotten a bid. You got national seed and hosting resumes all over the place in this league. But I guess my question is this. You know how much the NCAA likes its geographic diversity in terms of hosting. And, you know whether it's deserved or not. If the SEC, say, got 13 or 14 bids, you would hear crying from here to the West Coast. I'm just wondering, what do you think that looks like in the end in terms of spots that the league can get and a host and national seeds and all that? Because I feel like with RPI, we are in unprecedented territory here.
Yeah, and what used to be, as you mentioned, in years past, 13 wins kind of got you into the NCAA tournament, assuming you had a pretty good RPI. That's kind of what we always looked at for teams at the bottom was 13. And for being a top 8 national seed, I went back and looked. Every team that's won 20 games in SEC play, there's only been one team, I think it was South Carolina in 2016, won 20 games and was not a top 8 national seed. So 20's kind of been the landmark to be a top 8 national seed. Now, having said that, with the strength of this conference going up this year, when you bring Texas in and you bring Oklahoma in, I think those numbers are going to drop by a game. In other words, I think you could see some teams win 12 games in conference play this year, still get an NCAA bid. And I think you could see some teams that are sitting on the bubble of being a top 8 national seed, meaning you get to host regionals and super regionals at home, assuming you continue to win. I think that number could fall to 19 this year, instead of 20. And so if you get to 19 wins in conference play this year, I think you're going to be a top 8 with the strength of schedule, the RPI, and all those kind of things, But, I think in basketball, we got, 14 out of 16 in, if I'm not mistaken, in the NCAA tournament in basketball. I don't know that we get there this year. I'm sitting here looking, clearly Missouri and South Carolina right now on the outside looking in. So now you're down to 14. And Mississippi State, Florida is at 6 right now. they're going to have to be pretty good, but they're still within striking distance if they have a strong, last 4 weeks here, And so I really think there's 14 teams right now, depending on how they finish and how strong it is, that could get into the NCAA tournament. Look, I've always said this, and I've fought people over the years on, well, we got to have so many California teams in. We got to have so many California teams be able to host geographically. We got to have this. I'm not a fan of that. I'm a fan of the best 64 teams getting. I don't care where they come from. If they're all from one state, then they're all from one state. I don't care. I just want to see the best teams get into the NCAA. I want to see the best products get in there. Does it look better if we get a lot of different regions in, a lot of different teams in, a lot of conferences in? I'm not going to argue that. Of course it looks better. But at the end of the day, everybody doesn't get a trophy. And I think this is reward-based. And I think we should try to put in the best 64 teams into our field that we can. I think that's the right thing to do, Now, there's going to be a lot of bubble teams. There's going to be a lot of conversation there. This team got left out. This team should have been in. This team shouldn't have been in. There's always going to be that. We're going to have that, And I'm on record saying I don't necessarily agree. To me, whoever wins the conference tournament, whatever conference that is, that doesn't tell me that's the best team. I don't think it should be like that either. I understand why they do that because it brings a lot of excitement to the conference tournaments at the end of the year. And I like that part of it. But the best team to me is a team that performs over the course of 10 weekends. That shows me the most consistent team over the course of 30 games or 10 weekends versus having a really good weekend. Any team can have one good weekend. I always say it would be like telling Major League Baseball, listen, we're going to play 5.5 months of baseball. And then the last 2 weeks, whoever does the best in the last 2 weeks of Major League Baseball is going to be the AL East champ and the NL West champion. I think it's the best team over the course of 162. And for me, the conference tournament, I get it. I love the excitement of it. I'm a fan of it, but it doesn't tell me that should be the team that gets the bid out of that conference. I still think it should be based off the regular season in 10 weekends and 30 games.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we are past the midway point of SEC play. What have been your main takeaways up to this point this season?
Well, I mean, you've got to start with Texas, right? I mean, 16-2 coming into the SEC for the very first time. We knew that Texas, obviously one of the best programs history-wise in college baseball over the years. But, I mean, I went back and looked at my projections before the season started, and the coaches poll and the D1 baseball poll had Texas A&M finishing 7th or 8th in the conference, and yet they're sitting number 1, and they're the only conference team that has not lost a weekend series yet out of all 16. They're the only one that's undefeated. So, to me, that's a big surprise. The other one, I know Ole Miss had a rough weekend this past weekend. I think they dropped 2 of 3, but nobody had Ole Miss ranked at all. Baseball America, D1 Baseball, the coaches poll, and D1 Baseball, I think, had Ole Miss finishing 14th out of 16 teams preseason, and yet they've been a ranked team for a while now, and so that jumps out. And then, of course, Texas A&M in Florida. Texas, when I was listening to all the podcasts by the so-called experts back in January and February, I felt like everybody else is playing for second place. Like they'd already given A&M their first national title and they were going to win everything. And the start they got off to. Now, the good news for Texas A&M is, look, they've really turned the corner the last 3 weekends, and I think they're 9-1 in their last 10 games, and they're blowing through it right now. So they may end up being that team. I don't know if they're ever going to get to the point where they host anything this year, but they could certainly and on pace to get into the tournament. And once they get into the tournament, they're certainly talented enough with the way they're playing to get there. Obviously, Florida's been a little bit of a disappointment sitting down there at 6-12 right now. I think most people had them ranked and had them, in the top 5 in the SEC. But there's still time for these teams to kind of get their footing and for Florida to kind of get going. And, boy, I don't think anybody wants to have Texas A&M in their regional right now. The way they're playing right now, they're really going strong. So, Tennessee is doing really well, and I made this point on the air the other day. You go back to our last few national champions. I mean, go back to Mississippi State. They won their first national title, about 4 years ago? They go totally off the grid for 2 years. Like, big drop-off. Not only did they get in the NCAA tournament, they didn't make the SEC tournament, and then Ole Miss wins the next year. they missed the conference tournament for the next 2 years, much less getting a bid into the NCAA tournament. LSU won it 2 years ago, and while they were a regional team last year, they weren't a host. It dropped off a little bit for LSU last year, too. They got beaten, I think, in Game 7 over there in North Carolina at Chapel Hill in a regional last year. But Tennessee, man, after winning their first national title, they haven't lost a whole lot. Like, they're right up towards the top, RPI. They've set themselves up, to potentially be a top 8 national seed if they finish strong as well, And so those are kind of my takeaways. Vanderbilt had a big weekend this past weekend. Georgia started off great, and they've dropped a couple. So, look, it's a lot of back and forth. I think it's exactly what we thought it was going to be. We said these teams beat up on each other through the course of this 30 games, and some teams are going to jump out. Some teams are going to come on strong, at the end. And so it's kind of been, in some ways, about what we thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's 2 big series coming up this weekend. Are you on the call for anything in the SEC, by the way?
No, not
not this weekend.
Real stuff, but I'll be certainly following it for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's too bad. I think LSU Tennessee is the one I've been circling for a while, but then I think that's gotten upstage with A&M's run, because that series at Texas. I mean, tickets are already over $100 just to get in the park. We know the Schlossnagle angle. How interested are you in watching that one?
Oh, that's going to be fun. The only thing that would make it better is if Texas was going to College Station.
Yes.
Yep. That would be the only thing that would make it better, but it's still going to be can't miss TV, And so those to me are the 2 premium series this weekend, with Texas playing the way they're playing. And of course, A&M is, arguably the hottest team in the country right now going in there. Of course, the coaches switching places and all that kind of stuff. And so that's a big one. And then you mentioned LSU hosting Tennessee. That's a huge one too, And so it's going to be fun. It's all these top series. I mean, it feels like every weekend, man. It feels like there's top 5 teams going at it in the SEC, no matter who it is. It just feels like that's where we are right now. So you kind of get, you don't take it for granted for what you're seeing, because it's not every, you don't always get those kind of matchups, but we're kind of getting them now. And so I'm not going to say I'm numb to it, but it's like, hey, this is what we thought was going to happen. It's kind of what's happening right now. And it's been good baseball. And this is what I've always said about the SEC. And I think it's so true. And people always say, well, it's so tough. And it is. It's a mental and physical grind, as you guys know. And that's the reason why not many SEC head coaches have any hair left on their head, because it just beats you, man, mentally and physically. But the good news about that is, once you weather that storm and you get through it and you get in the postseason play, like, you can honestly stand up in front of your bunch as a coach and go, okay, we're not going to see anything from this point forward that we haven't already seen throughout the course of the conference. You're not going to see a 100-mile-an-hour fastball for the first time. You're not going to see a guy hit a ball 460 feet. You're not going to see dominant closers. I mean, you've already seen all that, right? And so I think it just prepares you for the NCAA tournament, because you can literally get up in front of your bunch and say, hey, we've seen it all this year, guys. Now it's about us going out and performing and playing well. There won't be a kid come back to dugout and go, I've never seen that fastball before. I've never seen it. No, you've seen the best already.
Pitching wise, like, who has impressed you there, either individual wise or team wise?
I think LSU, because I had them this weekend and I looked up an interesting number. LSU's team ERA right now, let me tell you what it is. It is 3.62 as a team, which is the 3rd best mark in the SEC. You got to go all the way back to 2015 since LSU's team ERA has been in that category, kind of where it is right now. This is the best team ERA since 2015 for LSU. And so what I'm getting at is, while the offense and LSU has kind of lived by the long ball, it's kind of what they've known for over the years, gorilla ball and all that, and they've averaged 129 homers the last 2 years. This year's team is a little bit different offensively. Like, they're not hitting a lot of home runs. I think they're kind of below middle point, but they do it a different way. It's 1 through 9. It's a different kind of team for Jay this year, more of a kind of team that he used to coach at Arizona, where they didn't hit a lot of homers, but they could hit 1 through 9. He could grab the platoon advantage off the bench, guys that we've seen him do. He's got about 11 or 12 offensive players that he really trusts and can match you up, righty versus lefty and vice versa and all that kind of stuff. So that really stands out for me. I mean, Arkansas at the top offensively when it comes to, runs per game and batting average from an offensive standpoint is really, really strong. And Georgia, Georgia got 105 home runs now, man. After losing Charlie Connon, who won everything last year and hit all the home runs, and we thought Georgia might take a little bit of a dip offensively. They haven't at all. They've been just as strong offensively, And so those are the kind of things that stand out. Texas is always known for, when I think of Texas and Texas programs, even before they got in the SEC, it was always built on pitching and defense. That's what made Texas strong. And that's kind of what they are right now. From an offensive standpoint, they're kind of middle of the pack on what they do, but number one in pitching. They can really play defense. So it's a typical Texas team for me, And so, yeah, so look, it varies. A lot of these teams are just bunched up. I tell you one thing I found very interesting after doing some stat stuff is the average SEC hitter in conference play and overall, so counting all the games, is hitting 307 this year, So the average OPS in the SEC for an SEC hitter is 956 right now. So offense continues to be king. I know it feels like we're not hitting as many homers. I think the weather's been a little bit cool in the Southeast in certain areas. Winds blowing in some of the ballparks for a little bit longer this year than what it typically does. But the exit velos are still off the chart, and the ball's going to fly in these last 4 weekends as it begins to heat up and wind begins to blow out a little bit.
Well, the weird thing about this last weekend, though, was you saw a couple of series results I didn't see coming. Vanderbilt sweeping Georgia and Kentucky taking the last two at Tennessee, both teams that are built around pitching and defense. And look, Ben, the teams that are hitting the most home runs, there's been a pretty good correlation with the exception of Texas between that and the SEC standings. Did we see – was it just a one-off thing that can happen in the SEC because of matchups, or did we see – pitching and defense maybe make a little bit of a comeback this weekend?
No, look, I think, again, and I'm not picking on Missouri, but there was a time years ago that there was always 3 or 4 teams that when you played them, you were going to win 2 out of 3 and maybe even sweep them if you had a team. This conference is so deep now, man. Like if you don't bring your A game to the table every weekend, you have a chance of getting beat past Missouri. Missouri's obviously but past that, man, like Kentucky, you remember how good Kentucky was last year? Yeah, they lost a lot. They fell off. But anybody can show up and beat you. I mean, look, LSU went into and Auburn's got a solid team. I'm not saying they don't. But everybody thought LSU would get swept last weekend at Auburn, and yet they did. And as good as Georgia's been swept twice now. And so it just goes to show you, I mean, Texas swept Georgia, and now Vanderbilt has swept Georgia. So if you don't play well on the weekend now, man, I'm telling you, anybody in this league can beat you 2 out of 3. And if you really don't play well, anybody can sweep you. That's kind of where we are now. Like you have to bring your A game. Your B game's not going to work. Your B game is not going to work in these conference matchups.
Ben, I'm curious. You played for a legend and Skip at LSU. What's your favorite Skip story? What's the story you tell your friends? Man,
look, Skip, we don't have enough time for all the stories. And look, when you're 18, 19, 20 years old, you don't totally understand everything that he's doing to you because you're too immature to understand it. You get mad and you don't understand why. You just go do it. And then years later, when you're coaching your own kids or you're coaching, you start to understand what Skip was trying to do. And I just look at Skip. The more I look at him, the more I am amazed at the things that he accomplished and what he meant to college baseball overall. I mean, you're talking about a guy that stepped into LSU, and he tells the story that when he came from Miami as a pitching coach just to visit LSU when they were recruiting him to be the next head coach, he made the statement there were more pigeons in the stands than there were people. And that was true. The only people that used to come to the ballpark right before Skip was just family members and girlfriends. That was the only people that ever showed up at LSU. And for me to step into that ballpark over the last 30 years and see, like this weekend, 12,000 people in the stands, and LSU pretty much averages 11 or 12. And look, Skip built that. And if you go around the country, people will tell you that, Ron Polk was the guy that got it started in the SEC, like when he had Thunder, Lightning, he had Clark, Palomero, Thigpen, Brantley, and Ron Polk and Mississippi State were going to College World Series back in the mid-'80s, and they are the ones that put the SEC on the map originally. And then Skip Bertman comes along and he just takes it to a different level. And Skip believed that if you build it, they will come. If you put a good product on the field, it will come. Yes, baseball in most instances does not make money at the collegiate level. We know that. But Skip believed that if you put enough fannies in the seats and you put a good product on the field, that you could make money. And LSU's proved that. And there's about 5 or 6 teams out there that are doing it now. They're mostly in the SEC now with Texas coming in as well. But, a quick story on Skip. Skip, to tell you how crazy Skip was about this stuff, he used to make us in the middle of a midweek game. He would say, McDonald, go to the concession stand and tell me if the hot chocolate in the coffee is hot or not.
Wow.
Like, who thinks of that kind of stuff? And I would go and I'd say, give me a cup of coffee. And I would drink it and go back and say, Coach, the hot chocolate's hot. The coffee's great. It's hot. Okay, good. Little things like that is what Skip thought about, not only about baseball stuff, but about putting fannies in the seats, and what is it going to take to put a good product on the field where people want to come watch the game of baseball. And Skip was so far, and I'll tell you this too. When Skip went to the athletic job at LSU and he became the AD, and you guys know about it, it's arguably the most success any athletic director has ever had at LSU. You win football national titles. Paul Maneri wins a national title in baseball when Skip's the AD. Like, it's track and field. It's like arguably the greatest run for an athletic director. And people looked at me cross-eyed about 5 or 6 years ago when I said, Skip Bertman will go down as the most influential person in LSU athletics history. Not because just the 5 national titles in 9 years, but what also he accomplished as an athletic director as well. And you guys know Miss Sandy, his wife, just passed away about 4 weeks ago. And of course I went to the funeral, and they were married 61 wonderful years, and to see Skip, it hurts my heart to see him going through that. And I get emotional talking about it, but he popped in the booth the other day, and he still comes to the ball games. And you guys might know this story, but this is what I love about Jay Johnson and LSU. And I'm not trying to turn this into an LSU podcast, but this is a really good story that Jay includes Skip once a week. Those two will meet up and they will talk about the game of baseball, because Jay understands the history of LSU baseball. And he wants his players to understand where this program came from and where it is now. And it's really cool to me that Jay sits Skip down. They meet once a week. They'll talk about players. They'll talk about teams. They'll talk about the past weekend, what went right, what went wrong. And so Jay's always picking up stuff from Skip. Skip's always sharing information. And so I think that's a really, really cool relationship that they have, because most college coaches, once they retire, they kind of step away from the game a little bit. But Skip stayed very involved, and good for Jay for keeping him involved in the game as well.
Yeah, that is awesome.
And Jay's done a tremendous job. That's LSU is a job that can crush a lot of people. And Jay, of course, got a natty last year. And I thought last year, after they recovered from a brutal schedule to start the season, I think they were 2-11 in league play, and frankly could have come within a break of advancing to a super easily in Chapel Hill last year, the way I remember it. But he's reloaded this year. I want to ask you a 2-part question here. I've seen a lot of chirping on Twitter between Tennessee and LSU, the last 2 national title winners. Those fan base has been going at it a little bit. How spicy will that one be this week in Baton Rouge? And number 2, I think the pitching that he's got at the top end. Cade Anderson's been phenomenal, although maybe a little bit off after throwing 135 in Norman. Einson's been a rock in that number 2 spot. Out of the bullpen, Zach Cowan's been unhittable. And then at the end, Evans has been just a lockdown closer. After that, I know they got a lot of talent. Shores, Smith, could have signed 7-figure contracts long ago. But there's been a drop-off in results from those 4 to those guys. I know they've got the talent. And you've seen Shores, I think, taken out of the – and I think there was like a comebacker involved in that may have changed the roles. You may know better than I do. That might have been why he wasn't starting last Sunday. But how do you see them shaping up on that staff from 5 down? Because I know they got a lot of talent, but the results haven't clicked quite yet like it has with those top 4.
Yeah, I mean, it's from an ERA standpoint, like we mentioned, they're 3rd in the country, so it's been pretty good. Compared to what it's been in previous years. You know what I'm saying? Like it's almost my gosh, it's almost 7/10 of a run better than what it was last year. Now, even last year, LSU's pitching staff led the nation in strikeouts in the entire country. They were number one. They're number two right now. They lead the SEC in strikeouts and on number two in the country behind Wake Forest. So what LSU does, and Nate Yeske, the pitching coach, they can strike you out. They got a lot of big arms, as you mentioned. They can strike you out. Walks can get in the way from time to time. And you mentioned Kate Anderson's going from a kid that had a 21 ERA in conference play last year, only threw 3 1/3, but he gave up 12 earned runs in 3 1/3 last year too. You know, a real number one. He's given up a few runs his last couple of times out, but overall, if you look at the strikeouts and the ERA, he's pretty solid. Ianson transferring in has been a really big help for LSU. Obviously, a kid that had a lot of experience. I think he was at UC Irvine or UC Santa Barbara, something like that last year out on the West Coast. You never know when those guys come into the SEC how that's going to translate. But his stuff is translated pretty good. 12 strikeouts last weekend in a ball game. I think he struck out 15 in another game. The concern for me for LSU is the 3 spot. And Shores, you mentioned Shores. He's a kid that threw 18 innings his freshman year, had Tommy John that freshman year, didn't pitch at all last year. So he came into this year at 6'8", with only throwing 18 innings in his entire college career. And so in a lot of ways, he was like he's a junior, but he was like a freshman when you talk about experience. And so he's still trying to feel out where he is. Jay, for whatever reason, decided to back him out of the rotation this weekend. I don't know if it was a wake-up call for him. He was the first reliever in the game 3 of that series. And so I could see him going back into that rotation a little bit. And so the number 3 starter, I think Jay's kind of waiting for somebody to kind of step up and raise their hand and be consistent and want to be that guy. You mentioned William Schmidt. I mean, that's what Jay did this past year. He brought in the number 1 freshman class in the entire country, and he brought in the number 1 incoming class. When you consider the freshman class, the portal class, the junior college class, it was the number 1 overall class in all of college baseball. So it's a very talented bunch, led by, the junior Jared Jones, who hit 28 home runs over at first base this year, not having quite that kind of year with home run production, but the batting average and the RBIs are really, really good. Evans has been a surprise as a true freshman at the back end. Maverick Rizzi, the 6'9" freshman, has been really good at the back end too, helping out. And so they've got some guys back there that are pretty good. I think what's hurting LSU a little bit more is, don't forget that Gavin Guidry, who was on the stock for LSU, who was on the mound when they won the national championship, who brings so much to the table, has not thrown one ball yet this year and just had season-ending back surgery. So I think nobody's talking about that with LSU because Evans has been so good. But if you had Guidry to go along with Evans and the other guys that are at the back end, this bullpen would probably be one of the best in the country. But look, everybody has injuries, and unfortunately, and we're praying that Guidry comes back fine, and maybe he can come back next year and with back surgery that he's having and kind of be the guy again. But they're not going to have him this year, and so I think the roles are starting to get defined at the back end of that bullpen. I think the only question right now is, who's going to be the number 3 starter on the weekend for LSU? And William Smith's kind of been the midweek starter. As you mentioned him, he has got a lot of talent trying to figure it out. But here's the scare for me. When you're dealing with true freshmen at the back end of your bullpen in high leverage situations, you're asking a lot in this league because there's not many freshmen that come into this league, especially in the SEC, and have significant roles. And we haven't talked about Curiel yet. Who's in every base this year, or every game this year. He's been on base in every game, and now he's 6th in LSU history for consecutive games reached. He's having a phenomenal freshman year. But when you start relying on true freshmen in big leverage moments, it can get sideways on you from time to time. But so far, they have performed well.
Yeah, they really have. Ben, I'm from Oxford. I went to Ole Miss, so it's kind of hard to believe it's been 25 years now that Mike has been the head coach at Ole Miss. How would you describe that relationship between the two of you?
Mike has always been one of those guys that I would climb in a foxhole with and get back to back, with, because that dude I was very competitive. He was just as competitive as I was. And I love throwing him. I tell people this all the time. I was lucky enough to play 9 years in the big leagues, and I never threw to a better defensive catcher than Mike Bianco. I could bounce a breaking ball with a runner at third base, and I had the confidence to know that he was going to figure out a way to block it up and throw the guy out at first base when we struck him out, And so when Mike got into coaching, I could already see it coming, because he was the guy that was always asking Skip questions about everything before the game, during the game, after the game. And so when Mike got into coaching, I wasn't shocked at all. And then when he went to Ole Miss and started having the success that he did, I wasn't shocked at all. Of course, what he's done at Ole Miss, the facilities that are there right now, what he's done to that program. And I know, and it really bothers me when the folks, and I told Mike this 100 times, you're a victim of your own success. And when you're having success, the expectations go through the roof. That's just the nature of the beast, But it aggravates me when I hear people want to run Mike off and all that. They're talking about firing him with the year he won the national championship. They went on that crazy run, and they're still rumbling a little bit. But that's a part of it. But Mike and I always tell people this is the most important thing for me. Not all these kids are going to play professional baseball. Most of them won't make it to MLB, and they won't make a living doing it if they do get there. But some of them may make it there. But as a guy that sent his son off to play baseball at LSU Eunice under Coach Willis, as a parent, you want to make sure you're sending your kid to a coach that not only is going to grow them on the field, make them a better baseball player, but it's also going to turn them into a good young man that's going to be after them to make good grades, to do the right things off the field. And when I think about that as a coach, Mike Bianco sits at the top of that list for me, because I know that dude, I know him so well that he's going to, and he's not the only one. There's a lot of great coaches across the country that are worried about you just as much off the field, to make sure that, and because they know the responsibility that they have, because these kids, you can shape their lives when they're 18 years old, 19 years old. They're going to create memories and learning lessons that'll last them forever, and they'll pass them on to their kids. But when I think of Mike Bianco, that's what I think of. I think of a great coach, but I think of a better human being that's going to mold these young kids into really great athletes, and more importantly, great people as well.
Yeah, I think the three longest tenured coaches in the league, I think Bianco's first, right? Mike Bianco's first, right? And I think then it's Tim
Van
Corbin
Horn.
and then Dave Van Horn. They're off by a year, I think. I don't remember who came first.
Right. And if I'm not mistaken, guys, Mike Bianco is the longest tenured coach in any sport in the SEC right now.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, and I think you see the pressure of the league. I think what is impressive, I think it's way more impressive to do what Mike Bianco did. And I'm glad that he finally got a national title, because that seems to be kind of a stamp of validation. I think it's harder to go. How many years in a row did they go to a regional without missing, Graham? I mean, it was a bunch.
I mean, every year, so he's 25 years. He hasn't been 3 times.
Right.
Okay, yeah. And like, I'm seeing the other two coaches. Tim Corbin has been 18 years in a row at Vanderbilt. You starting until last weekend, some of the game has passed him by. They don't have the power. They're trying to win like he's always win, which I've just kind of laughed at that. And Dave Van Horn in kind of a different way, because he doesn't have the ring yet, which they're, one foul ball away from getting there. I just think it's so hard to do that. And you see, I think to where you're going, I'm just going to throw that out as a concept, and you can go with it where you want. I think those are 3 guys that I think have at times been the victim of their own success and expectations. And I think it's only gotten harder with, as you said, everybody in the league right now is a factor except for Missouri.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I mean, the salaries, obviously, as you guys know, went up for coaches. And anytime you start making a lot of money and then you have success, and then people start to rumble because they expect you to do it. And people just don't understand how difficult it is to do. I mean, think about this. We always talk about expectations. And when coaches start making a lot of money and you start winning ball games, the fan bases expect, you to win every year. And we were just talking about this. I mean, to tell you how hard it is to win, the SEC has won the last 5 national titles, and it's 5 different programs that have won the national title in that span. That goes to show you it hadn't been like one dominant team that's won 2 out of 4 or 3 out of 5. It's been 5 different programs. And the crazy thing about that is Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Tennessee all just won their very first national title overall, to tell you how hard it is to do, And so, you were talking about Dave Van Horn. I think he's been to Omaha 9 times, hadn't won it yet. But think about this. Think about Mike Martin in Florida State. How many times did Mike Martin go to the College World Series? Was it 19 times or something? Something crazy like that, and never won one of them. That's how hard it is to win. And I think it's harder now than it's ever been, because coaches are dealing with so much, as you guys know. I mean, we're dealing with the transfer portal. We're dealing with NIL money. We're dealing with partial scholarships. Next year, that apparently is going to change. We'll have roster limitations last year. And so there's a lot that's going on now. It's the most difficult time to win, and I think it's the most difficult time ever to be a head coach in college baseball because of everything that's going on.
Agreed.
Yeah. When does all this? I don't think it's getting settled anytime soon. I think, in my opinion, the NCAA has sort of made a mistake assuming that the much anticipated house settlement thing is going to solve it. I don't think it is. I mean, even if it did, you still got a lot of pieces to pick up. When and how does college baseball get? I mean, it's a great product, right? But I mean, there are things that we'd all change, if for nothing else, for the sanity of the players and the coaches involved.
Yeah, I mean, I talk to coaches all the time, like y'all probably do, and nobody likes where it is. They don't like it. It's more on their plate. It's harder for them. I always say this. We don't allow our NBA players, our NFL players, and our MLB players to be free agents after every year. Yeah. Why are we allowing 18 to 22-year-old kids to be free agents after every year? That's insanity to me. And people always say, well, what would you fix about it? And I always say this. I'm okay with kids making money. I'm okay with that. I don't have a problem with it. I do think there should be a cap on it to try to keep everybody in the same ballpark, if you could, to keep it fair across the board. I don't know if that's ever happened. But what I would do is I would say you get one. You can transfer one time if you choose to. You can transfer a second time if you want to, but you're going to sit out a year. That's going to change all this jumping. Well, they paid me 50 last year. If you don't give me 100, they're going to give me 100 over here. I'm going to jump over here. And then the next year, you're jumping somewhere else. I'm not saying that all kids do that, but there's a lot of them that are doing that right now.
Yeah.
I don't like that piece of it also. That's one thing. Now, everybody said, well, Ben, what if the coach leaves? Oh, okay. If you transfer once and you went to play for Paul Maneri at South Carolina, all of a sudden Paul retires. I'm okay with you getting another transfer at that point. I'm okay if your coach leaves for another job or he retires. I'll give you a second one. What I also don't like is now in the junior college world, they can go play 2 years of junior college ball and it doesn't count against their eligibility. So then they go to a D1 school and they got 4 more years of eligibility. To me, that hurts the high school seniors that are out there right now. Like now you got kids that could get a red shirt in junior college ball, then they could play 2 years. So they show up to a D1 campus and they're 22 years old. And now they got 4 more years. And so we're going to have 25 and 20-year-olds playing the game of college baseball. I'm not a big fan of it. I think it should count. If you play 2 years of JC ball, that's 2 years of your eligibility. You get 2 more years once you transfer to D1 baseball. I mean, there's a few things, but the NCAA, honestly, guys, has been an absolute travesty through all of this. I'm not a fan of the NCAA. I'm almost to the point now where do we need the NCAA to be involved in any of this? I think these conferences could figure it out themselves because the NCAA has dropped the ball on so many issues the last 4 or 5 years, not to mention the NIL stuff, not to mention the transfer portal stuff that they could halfway control and make better. They just hadn't wanted to step up and do anything about it, And so I'm so disappointed in the NCAA in so many different ways right now. But I also played for Dale Brown. I played basketball for Dale Brown. And when I was 18 years old, I hear Dale talk about certain things from the NCAA. And then when you're 18, you pay much attention. Well, I'm starting to see some of the things that he was talking about way back when.
Yeah.
Where does leadership come from? That's what just blows my mind. You have college presidents, you have athletic directors. They're pointing the finger over at Congress, which to me is just kind of laughable, given that track record. Like, why does nobody step forward and lead? What does it take?
From what look, I don't totally understand all the bits and pieces behind it, but my understanding is the NCAA is scared of getting sued by everybody. And so that's the reason why they haven't put their foot down more than what they have, and that might be something to it. I don't know, but I still would like to have somebody to have some guts and say, no, this is wrong. We're not going to do this. We're not going to. And look, I am a fan of everybody getting to play sports. I want everybody to play, but the American people overwhelmingly have said that biological men should not be playing female sports. We know that what can happen, and we've seen the injuries that happen and all those kind of things. And yet the NCAA just sat back and let it happen, and again, I want everybody to be able to play. I just don't think biological men should be playing with females, dressing in the same locker room as females. I'm just not a fan of that, man. If I had a daughter playing college sports, I would be so upset about those things that were going on at the time, and so hopefully that's going to get changed, and they'll get to play in another league or play with the guys or whatever, because I do want everybody to play. But the stuff like that, the NCAA has just kind of rubbed me wrong on over the years. And I think there's certain things that we can do to clean it up. Now, I don't think we're ever going to get away from the NIL stuff. I don't. I think it's here to stay. I think that's where we are now. Although it was not, as you guys know, it was not put in as pay for play. It was put in if you brand to. I'll give you an example. Livy Dunn, the most popular gymnast in the world, right, who just graduated from LSU after her 5th year. She did it the right way. She brought in a brand. She grew her social media to where it was supposed. And that was a great example of what NIL was designed to do. If you worked really hard, you could represent some things, get some money on the side from Lululemon and whatever else like she does. That's fine. That's what it was for. But it was never for, hey, we're going to pay you $2 million to come be the quarterback at Tennessee, or we're going to pay you $4 million. That's not what it was designed to do. And I think that's where, but listen, you guys are like me. When this first started 4 or 5 years ago, it was like the Wild West, and the trains were off the tracks, and it was no coming back from it from where we are. And that's kind of where it continues to go, because the NCAA told us for years, we want parity in the game. We got to have parity in our game to make it complete. Well, we're the furthest thing away from parity that we've ever been. I feel sorry for the mid-major programs in baseball that are out there right now, because all they are is a minor league feeder to the big boys that are out there right now. And so they take a chance on John Doe, who is an okay high school kid, but none of the Power Fours wanted him. They didn't want him. He wasn't good enough to play. Well, they bring him in, they coach him up, he gets a lot better, and he becomes a real dude. And guess what happens? The very next year, here come the Tennessees and the LSU and whatever, and they suck him up, and he goes and plays for them. Those guys are very frustrated with the way the system is right now, too. So there's some things that I would definitely change.
Last question for you. In my mind, you've got a top 4 in the league in some order: Texas, Arkansas, Tennessee, LSU. I think those, to me, feel like the teams that have got the best shot to win a national title. Would you agree with that? Which of those 4 would you take? And is there a team outside those 4 that you see would have a sneaky shot to make a deep run into Omaha?
No, I think that's fair. I mean, I think Texas, Arkansas, LSU, and Tennessee, if I had to put money on it right now, that would be my 4 that I think are Omaha teams if they continue to do what they are doing right now. I think that's fair. I think Georgia, with the way they hit home runs, if they get a little bit more consistent pitching, could sneak up on some folks. And I think A&M, the way Texas A&M playing right now, again, I don't think they can work their way into a hosting situation unless they just win their next 4 series, and maybe they do. Maybe they end up being a top 16 national seed and get to regional at home. But like with the talent they have and the way they're playing right now, I think they could be a team. But here's what we know. It's these teams, to me, are all so close in talent and everything. What always happens is, guys, who's playing the best baseball when it matters the most? Because I think I could close my eyes and put a dot on that sheet right there, and I could hit on one team, and I could say if that team got hot at the right time, it wouldn't surprise me up at the College World Series. Or I put a dot there, and I could say Ole Miss ends up at the College World Series. I mean, remember what Ole Miss did 3 years ago, right? I mean, they were pretty much midway point. They got hot. They make this incredible run, go on the road. They win a regional on the road. They win a super regional on the road, go all the way to Omaha. Nobody thought they should be there, and they win Omaha too, And so I think all these teams, I think there's 10 teams I can stick a dot on right now and say that team is talented enough to win at Omaha if they get hot at the right time.
Yeah. Well, Ben, appreciate your time today. Where are you going next? When's the next time you're in an SEC ballpark?
I hit the road for a couple of weeks with the Orioles, and I come back and I got LSU hosting Arkansas. Will be a big series. We'll do all three of those, two of them on linear and one will be a digital game. But that'll be my last three regular season games of the year. And then I'll go back to Baltimore and do some stuff with the Orioles and then come back for a regional, a super regional, and the College World Series. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. But as you guys mentioned early in this, there's some big series weekend and next weekend. So a lot's going to happen, and there's going to be a lot of flip-flopping between national seeds and teams getting in and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be a great brand of baseball.
But by the way, how excited are you calling Orioles games? I mean, my kid, he's got an Adley Rutschman jersey. You got Gunnar Henderson. You got all kinds of players. How much fun has that been to see that bunch develop?
It's a lot more fun. I'm going to tell you this, 5 or 6 years ago when the Orioles were losing 100 games every year, it wasn't so much fun. Ballpark every day. All right, we're going to lose today. The question is, how bad are we going to get beat? Well, going into this year, I think the Orioles had won the most games in the American League out of any other team. They won 101 a couple of years ago. They won 91, been in the playoffs each of the last 2 years. And, there's some good young talent. They're off to a little bit of a rough start this year. Some players kind of nicked up a little bit, banged up. But when you start talking about Gunnar Henderson from Alabama, signed, he had committed to Auburn, and the Orioles went and got him in first pick of the second round. And, of course, he's been an all-star and finished fourth in the MVP voting last year. But Gunnar and Rutschman and, of course, Westberg from Mississippi State, he's a big of that. And so there's some SEC guys that are out there. It's a fun young team to watch. And so it's been cool to cover those guys the last couple of years.
Hey, Ben, thank you so much for joining us. God bless you, my man. And hopefully we'll do this again before the end of the season.
God bless you guys, too. I always look forward to I love talking college baseball, especially SEC baseball. So I appreciate you guys having me on.
All right. That was a lot of fun. That's Ben McDonald, baseball guy extraordinaire. I guess that's if you sum it up into one sentence, that'd be a good summary. Thanks for joining us, Ben.
Anytime.